question, does the weather office in Norman, the Storm Prediction Center, do they do warnings, or how are they used by the Weather Channel? How does this differ from Torcon, et cetera?
Well, the difference is that local weather service offices issue warnings. It's tornadoes, severe thunderstorm, flash flood, 122 of them nationwide. Jim's office is the one for here. And we issue the severe weather watches and outlooks and mesoscale discussions that go back as far as 8 days in the case of convective outlooks. Although I'm not sure anybody's ever actually issued an 8-day outlook area yet. But we issue severe weather outlooks that they're very general, they're very broad brush from day 3 to day 8. They get a little bit more specific with total severe areas at day 2 and 3. And then at day 1, it breaks down into specific tornado, wind, and hail probabilities that you can think of as being within 25-mile radius of any given point in that area is your probability. The numbers might seem small. You might look at that and say, oh, that's only 5%. But a 5% actually triggers our slight risk categorical criteria, because the 5% tornado risk within 25 miles of here on any given day is huge, and it's much bigger than climatology. And on a given outbreak day, high-risk type of day, we might issue a 30% risk of a tornado within 25 miles of a spot is very, very, very unusual. It's very dangerous.
A follow-up question. Somebody asked that they seem to remember tornado warning only meant that it was issued after visual spotting. Is that different today?
Yes. As you were saying in your presentation, we don't necessarily wait for the spotter report of a tornado on the ground. If we have pretty strong indication based on Doppler radar that a tornado is likely, we'll try to issue that warning. And the purpose of that is to try to give people as much lead time as possible to get to a safe place. If we wait till the tornado is on the ground, then there's already damage occurring, there might already be loss of life. So trying to get that warning out early based on the radar indication can hopefully save lives.
Great. Chris, this is a question for you. You've been around Oklahoma, Southern Illinois, you chase around a lot. Could you say some words about the value of amateur radio and spotter networks that are amateur radio based?
Well, the benefit of amateur radio is its immediate two-way communication. At the Weather Service office, for instance, that we have in Norman, Oklahoma, the meteorologists down there are all licensed amateur radio operators. And they're actually providing real-time information to the net control operators and sometimes even talking directly to the spotters. It's not one of these trickled down through a hierarchy of 72 networks and all that. So they're getting real-time information back and forth. And they can ask those questions. A lot of times when spotter reports come in, let's say it came in on Spotter Network, you can't really tell the quality of that report. I mean, it's good in text, but when you're actually talking with somebody on the radio, you can do Q&A with them, saying, okay, well, is that wall cloud rotating, or are you seeing this, or where were the power flashes? And of course, the nice thing about amateur radio too is that it's just a good benefit to have for any type of disaster situation that happens, whether it's tornadoes, terrorism. You get lonely and you just want to talk to somebody on the radio or whatever. It's so easy to become a ham operator these days now that it's worth actually having a particular ticket. But I will say that one size doesn't fit all. I can make reports on my iPhone here through Spotter Network. I can do it at home on my computer. I can do it through amateur radio. I can get on the phone and call an 800 number. It just depends what works best for you to do. But I still encourage people to get into it. And I think for me personally, and I've been trying to convince the American Radio Relay of this for a long time, spotting is probably the single most universal thing of interest to people in amateur radio these days. I mean, the mysteries of being able to pick up a microphone and talk to somebody on the other side of the country, that was something 50 years ago. But every kid now is playing video games with somebody on the opposite side of the world, and they don't think twice about the technology. But ham radio still has a lot to offer in terms of the stuff that you can do with it, and more so as a community service. And I think in terms of storm spotting, that is probably the single most common time we would ever use ham radio in emergency communications to get our skills up. We don't have terrorist attacks often, unfortunately, but we do have severe weather often, and I think it's something that people really need to look into.
Two more really quick questions, and then we'll finish up. If you could just, Walker, maybe just briefly talk about, when you talk about the RFD, how does that mean? Does that come before or after tornadoes? Like the circulations?
It's there all the time. An RFD is a critical part of a supercell. It is the second downdraft, but it appears to be, at least based on research out there. Like I said, the key that turns on tornadogenesis. What the latest research suggests is that there's multiple surges to these RFPs, and they have different character to them. And we need to figure out which character turns on the tornadogenesis. But an RFP is always there, at least in supercell.
Really good questions. Everything, I mean, I wish I could go through all of them. If you want to come up afterward and ask specific questions to any of us, feel free. But I do want one more thing of utmost importance is, if we're making a report and you're not in a ham radio net, or what can we do to issue a spot report for people who are new to this? I'll take it again.
Well, again, I go back to Spotter Network, like spotternetwork.org. When you register on the spotternetwork.org site, a couple of things happen. One is you're given a very unique spotter ID number. It's nothing you can remember. It's like 123QX1 something or other. That goes into your little client, and that's going to identify you to the network. More importantly, though, in order to be able to get on the network, they have a fairly comprehensive test that you have to take. It's actually worth going through. It's and not to just the National Weather Service, but the spotter guide that Spotter Network uses for their training is much better than what the Weather Service has come out with. It's a very thorough document that gets into a lot of different things. It's basically designed to at least get the average person up to speed about what they would be looking at, what kinds of things they need to make reports for. But once you're on the network, I mean, basically all you do is, if you've got the client at home and you don't have a GPS, you just tell it your latitude and longitude. That's fairly easy to find by doing a Google search. Once it's running, it always knows where you're at. You say, make a report, the form comes up, and say, I got a tornado, what's happening now? You can put a little descriptor in there, it's pretty, I'm going to go take pictures of it. You press send, it goes off. The Weather Service has it, Fox News has it, everybody has it. If you've got a GPS and you're doing it in the car, the only difference is you tell Spotter Network to use the GPS, and it's always looking at your current location. All the rules for spotting still apply. The only difference is that now, and I know some EM folks will cringe at this, because they did some of the talks that I did in Oklahoma a couple of years ago, that they don't like the ideas of rogue spotters operating in their county without being part of their organization. But the fact is that we are trying to get more people involved in making severe weather reports, and not everybody has the time or the desire to be affiliated directly with an emergency management agency. But we all want to be able to help out. But there does have to be some minimal level of criteria that says that, you know, somebody in the EOC in DuPage County, when they see that spotter report coming on Spotter Network, has at least some faith in it. DuPage County will probably check that out with one of their own spotters as well when it comes in, just to, you know, to verify what's going on. But that's the thing, is that you have to have a certain level where you can trust those reports, but you don't want to make it so tight or difficult for people to get in that people say, God, what a hassle that is. But I think that's the thing. You know, some people are using eSpotter still. I hear that the Weather Service is probably going to be phasing the eSpotter program out. One of the things that I hear, I don't know if this is for sure happening, we can talk to Tyler and some other people, but there's some talk that Spotter Network in the future will include the ability to like snap a photo on your phone and just say link it right away. So as soon as I make my report, that link will be available. And as I said earlier in my talk, picture's worth 1,000 words. People at home see the tornado, it's much more real to them when they see it coming. Same thing with the Weather Service. They're looking at radar, they're not quite sure what it is, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The reports start coming in, they're like, oh yeah, that's real, okay, out goes the tornado. It can be as simple as that when they're riding the fence to make a decision whether it's a severe, nothing, or a tornado. Just get that one report.
And easiest way, if you have none of that, 911. And tell them you're a trained spotter and make your report.
Ask them why the sirens are going off.
I will interject real quick and say that if you're out there as a spotter, you are still, even in the era of radar, and for the foreseeable future, will be performing an absolutely essential service to the integrated warning system. From the SPC level, to the WFO level, to the local emergency managers, to the ham radio operators, all the spotter nets. What you do is essential. What you do is life-saving. What you do is important. And I absolutely applaud and commend you for being out there on the front lines of your communities, trying to protect the communities and keep them rather safe. Thank you.
Well, folks, I hope you would all agree with me. This has been a very worthwhile day, not just a long morning or afternoon, but a good, worthwhile day. And what I'd like to do is just take 1 minute before our panelists and our presenters, walk off the stage, just to have them stand up and wait until the end. And I'd like everybody just to give them some a sign of our appreciation by applause. Chris, if you can get Chris Milne, we have Paul Sermatka, we have Skip Talbot, Jim Nelson, Walter Ashley, Roger Edwards, and our MC, Tanny Sullivan. That you put into this, and we have a little token of our appreciation down here.